He was a highly influential Scottish political economist and philosopher, based known for his book The Wealth of Nations, and he is widely considered to be the father of modern economics. His work is both a foundation in the history of modern philosophy and a major source of political and economic reform in the past 2 centuries. It has been assumed that Adam Smith was born on June 5, 1723, in the port town of Kirkcaldy in Scotland. He started his academic life by studying moral philosophy at Glasgow University. After finishing his studies there, he received a scholarship and entered Oxford University, where he spent about 6 years studying European literature. He became to public recognition and gained fame after started giving lectures at Edinburgh. This led him far along to become a professor of rhetoric and moral philosophy at the University of Glasgow. In Glasgow, he also became part of a brilliant intellectual circle that included David Hume, who became one of the closest of his many friends, John Home and William Robertson. His lectures there covered the field of ethics, rhetoric, law and political economy. Teaching there formed the basis of his later book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, where in this book he argues that human beings naturally desire a mutual sympathy of sentiments with their fellows, which means that people wishes to see their judgments and sentiments echoed in others. His ability for fluent, persuasive, if a rather rhetorical argument is much in evidence, and give him great praise and status in Britain and across Europe. In his work, he bases his explanation not on a special moral sense, nor like Hume to any decisive extent on utility, but on sympathy. However, there has been much argument on the contradiction between Smith's emphasis in the moral sentiments on sympathy as a fundamental human motive, and on the other hand, the key role of self-interest in the wealth of nation. In the former, he seems to put more emphasis on the general harmony of human motivations and activities under a beneficent providence, while in the latter, despite the general theme of the invisible hand, promoting the harmony of self-interests. Smith left Glasgow to travel to Europe as a tutor. While travelling, he met several leading European intellectuals, including Voltaire, Rousseau and Quesnay. While not uncritical of his new acquaintances, Smith was specifically impressed with Quesnay and other French elites, who attacked the nobility of extravagance and the government's intervention in the economy as harmful to agriculture, productivity and national prosperity. His travel also helped him to write The Wealth of Nations, a treatise on the causes of prosperity and the character of commercial life that is regarded as a central foundation for modern economics. In this book, he argues against the school of economic thought of mercantilism. He says that real wealth does not consist of gold and silver or money. It consists rather of the ability to satisfy one's needs and desires. Since each person always wishes to better his condition, thus he argues in favor of limiting political interference in market and stresses the idea that everyone knows his situation, including his goals and desires, as well as the opportunities available to him, better than anyone else does. Therefore, individuals should be allowed to decide how to best to apply and sell their labor or goods, with whom to exchange and on what terms, and so on. Individuals certainly know their situations better than any distant legislator. Smith also sought to contribute to the science of a statesman or legislator by the arguing that universal affluence or a broad increase in the standard of living is best achieved by a market economy. He condemns the intervention of legislators who overestimate their ability to direct the lives of others. He argues that the policies and public institutions that best allow us to better our condition should be adopted to achieve this ideal situation. He is in favor of policies and institutions in which the division of labor is allowed to progress, in which trade is free, and in which taxes and regulations are light, which he thinks are the best policies to have a free market economy. He states that in market-oriented economy based on private property, each person's working on better his condition will increase the supply and thus lower the prices of whatever good he is producing. This means that others will be in a better position to afford his goods. In this scenario, when each person serving his ends is, in Smith's famous phrase, led by an invisible hand, simultaneously serving others' ends as well. This will also provide more plentiful goods and services, both in a greater variety and at a much lower prices. Theory of the invisible hand is a metaphor that illustrates hidden economic forces. It describes the unseen forces that impact the free market through actions based on individual self-interest. In this theory, consumers basing decision on self-interest creates a positive outcomes for the economy. It is a foundational concept for a rational choice theory, which states that people will make decisions based on their self-interest and benefits. Smith believes that people act in their own best interest, which ultimately benefit the economy. This might trigger the idea of selfishness in society. However, Smith himself did not believe that everyone is fundamentally selfish in any narrow sense. He argued that people's self-interest in fact includes the interest of others, in particular their family and friends, and even their country or countrymen. Nevertheless, he did believe that natural compassion is limited and that whatever other motivations people feel, their desires to better their condition is always present. Thus, it is not from the generosity of the butcher, the brewer, the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their interest. The phenomena of Smith's market mechanism was that it could coordinate the desperate individual's efforts of an indefinite numbers of people and create an overall benefit for the good of society.
Please tell me, Master, what must I do to have eternal life?
Go forth and maximize profits.
The wealth of nations provided the origin for the concept of gross domestic product, GDP, and transformed the importing and exporting business. Before the publication of The Wealth of Nations, countries declared their wealth based on the value of their gold and silver deposits. Highly critical of mercantilism, Smith argued that countries should be evaluated based on their levels of production and commerce. This concept was the basis for creating the GDP metric for measuring a nation's prosperity. Having lived modestly in 1790 at the age of 67, Smith died in Edinburgh. On his deathbed, he asked that his unpublished papers be burned, except for those that would become his essay on philosophical subjects, published subsequently. His greatest legacy is his moral justification for a free commercial society. He showed us that a system of free exchange that puts the individual consumer at its center is far better at increasing broad prosperity than the prevailing mercantilist, protectionist system. His writing profoundly impacted generations of economic theorists, from David Ricardo and Karl Marx in the 19th century to John Maynard Keynes and Milton Friedman in the 20th. His work helped lay down the moral and economic foundations for a great part of our modern world.